She invited her poor janitor to her lavish birthday party as a joke. A cruel plan to mock him in front of glittering chandeliers and richer guests. She expected laughter. She expected whispers, smirks, and humiliation. After all, he was just a man who mopped floors and emptied trash bins. But the moment he stepped into the grand hall, dressed with quiet dignity, something shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses froze in midair. A heavy silence swallowed the room. Because in that instant, everyone realized this man was not who they thought he was. Suddy was the kind of man people looked through, not at. He moved quietly through marble hallways, pushing his cleaning cart like a shadow that never complained. Calm, polite, always on time, always respectful. To the rich lady who owned the estate, he was just the janitor. The man who scrubbed the floors before dawn and vanished before the guests arrived. She never learned his full name, never asked about his life. To her, he had a place, and it was somewhere beneath her notice. She mocked his worn shoes when friends visited. She laughed at his old clothes, calling them vintage poverty. Sometimes she spoke about him while he stood right there, as if he were furniture instead of flesh and blood. Suddy heard every word. He lowered his eyes. He kept working. People mistook his silence for weakness. They assumed humility meant defeat. But what no one in that house understood was this. Suddy wasn't broken by life. He wasn't defeated by circumstance. He was a man carrying a past he chose not to explain, and a truth he was waiting for the right moment to reveal. The idea was born between silk dresses and sparkling jewelry. While wandering through an upscale boutique with her wealthy friends, the lady spoke excitedly about her upcoming birthday party, an extravagant evening planned in a five-star hotel ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, live music, guests who measured their worth in stocks and surnames. Then, with a careless laugh, she said it. You know what would be hilarious? She smirked. If I invited my janitor. Her friends paused, then burst into laughter. The poor one asked, barely hiding her amusement. The quiet man who cleans your floors? Another added. Yes, the lady replied, eyes gleaming with cruelty. Imagine him standing there, surrounded by all of this. He wouldn't even know which fork to use. They laughed harder, feeding off one another's arrogance. Someone suggested making it a surprise. Someone else joked about offering him champagne just to watch him panic. To them, it wasn't bullying. It was entertainment. The lady pictured it clearly in her mind. Suddy standing stiffly in the corner, clothes out of place, hands trembling as he held a glass he was afraid to drop. She imagined the whispers, the stares, the unspoken judgment. For once, she thought, everyone would see the difference between people like her and people like him. Later that afternoon, back at the estate, she found Suddy quietly mopping the hallway floor. The marble reflected his bent figure, the same way it had every day for years. She didn't greet him. Suddy, she said sharply, as if calling an object. He stopped immediately, straightened up, and turned to face her. Yes, Ma. She crossed her arms, studying him the way one inspects something disposable. I'm having my birthday party this Saturday, she said, at the Grand Orion Hotel. He nodded politely, waiting. I've decided to invite you. The words hung in the air. She watched closely, expecting something. Wide eyes, stammering, confusion. Fear, maybe. Embarrassment. Panic. After all, men like him didn't belong in places like that. But Suddy didn't flinch. He didn't ask questions. He didn't look down at his clothes. He didn't hesitate. Instead, he gave a small nod and said calmly, Thank you, Ma. That was it. No surprise. No protest. No visible discomfort. Just gratitude. The lady felt something unexpected crawl up her spine. Unease. Don't be late, she added quickly, trying to regain control. Dress appropriately. Yes, Ma, he replied, already returning to his work. She walked away unsettled. Why wasn't he nervous? Why wasn't he begging to refuse? Why didn't he look ashamed? That night, she told her friends what happened, mimicking his calm voice with mockery. They laughed again, but something about the story didn't sit right with her. Maybe he doesn't understand what he's walking into, one friend said. Oh, he will, the lady replied confidently. Everyone will. As the days passed, Anticipation grew, not excitement, but a twisted sense of superiority. The party preparations intensified. Designers were hired. A guest list filled with powerful names was finalized. In the back of her mind, Suddy's calm response echoed again and again. "Thank you, Ma." No resentment, no fear, no desperation. On Friday evening, she passed by the janitor's quarters, a small, modest room tucked away from the luxury of the main house. The door was slightly open. Inside, she noticed something strange. Suddy was carefully polishing a pair of old leather shoes. Not torn, not cheap, just classic. He handled them with care, like something valuable. For a brief moment, she almost asked where he was going. But she stopped herself. Why should she care? Saturday arrived. The Grand Orion Hotel glittered like a palace. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Guests arrived dressed in elegance, dripping with confidence and wealth. The lady stood near the entrance, greeting guests, smiling proudly. Then, just as the room reached its peak, as laughter echoed and music softened, someone at the door froze. Whispers rippled through the hall. Heads turned. The lady followed their gaze and felt her breath catch. Suddy had arrived, but not as the man she thought she knew. He walked in with a calm, unshakable presence, upright posture, polished shoes, and a tailored suit that fit him like it belonged to his body. His hair was neatly combed, his expression composed, his eyes steady. He didn't look lost. He didn't look afraid. He looked prepared. The laughter faded. The mockery died in throats. And for the first time since she'd met him, the rich lady realized something terrifying. This wasn't a joke anymore. That night, after the invitation and the unsettling calm that followed it, Suddy returned to his small room at the far edge of the estate. It was a space most people would overlook: plain walls, a narrow bed, a single bulb that flickered softly above. Nothing about it hinted at mystery or importance, except for the old wooden box hidden beneath his bed. Suddy knelt slowly, his movements careful, almost ceremonial. He pulled the box out and brushed away a thin layer of dust, as if time itself had tried to bury what was inside. His fingers hesitated on the lid for a moment. Then he opened it. Inside were pieces of a life no one at the mansion knew existed. Old photographs lay neatly stacked, creased at the edges, faded by years of being handled and hidden. In them, a younger Suddy stood tall, confident, dressed in perfectly tailored suits. He wasn't standing in hallways or holding cleaning tools. He was standing on stages, under bright lights, in rooms filled with people who clapped instead of ignored him. There were pictures of him shaking hands with important men, smiling beside women in elegant dresses. One photo showed him mid-speech, eyes sharp, posture commanding, the crowd behind him blurred by movement and applause. Another photo stopped him every time. It showed him an awards ceremony, holding a plaque, his name engraved in bold letters. The smile on his face wasn't forced. It was earned. Once, people had admired him. Once, they had listened when he spoke. Suddy closed his eyes, letting the memories rise. He remembered the sound of applause, how it filled a room and stayed with you long after it faded. He remembered the feeling of being respected, of being seen not for what you wore or where you came from, but for who you were. Back then, doors opened when he walked toward them. People stood when he entered a room. Life had been generous until it wasn't. The fall hadn't come all at once. It never does. A bad investment, a betrayal by someone he trusted like family. Legal battles that drained more than money. They drained energy, hope, dignity. He remembered signing papers late into the night, convincing himself that tomorrow would be better. Tomorrow kept moving further away. When the company collapsed, the headlines were merciless. The same people who once applauded him disappeared. Phone calls went unanswered. Invitations stopped arriving. Respect evaporated faster than it had formed. And then came the hardest part, not the loss of wealth, but the loss of identity. People didn't ask how he was. They asked what happened. So Suddy walked away from that world quietly. He chose anonymity over pity, silence over explanation. The janitor job wasn't punishment. It was survival. Honest work that asked nothing from him except effort. No questions, no judgment, just floors to clean, and hours to fill. He took it willingly. In a mansion, no one knew his past, and that was exactly how he wanted it. The rich lady never asked. No one ever did. They saw his uniform and decided his story was small. Suddy reached deeper into the box. There was a neatly folded suit inside, dark, classic, timeless. He lifted it carefully, running his hand over the fabric. It wasn't new, but it was impeccably kept. He had pressed it himself countless times, even when there was nowhere to wear it. Not out of hope, out of remembrance, because life didn't erase his worth. It only paused it. He stood up and moved toward the small mirror mounted on the wall. The reflection, looking back at him, was older now. Lines etched by experience framed his eyes. But the eyes themselves were unchanged, steady, intelligent, unbroken. Doubt tried to creep in, the way it always did late at night. What if they laugh? What if you don't belong there anymore? What if this is a mistake? He had felt this before. On the night, everything fell apart. On mornings when he put on his janitor uniform and felt the weight of judgment before a single word was spoken. But tonight was different. Tonight wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about honoring himself. Suddy straightened his shoulders and looked at his reflection. "I will not embarrass myself," he whispered. "Not today." The words weren't defiant. They were calm, certain. He carefully laid the suit on the bed, smoothing out the fabric. Then he placed the photos back into the box, closing the lid gently, as if tucking away ghosts that no longer needed to haunt him. Tomorrow, he would walk into that grand hotel, not as a janitor pretending to belong, and not as a rich man trying to reclaim the past, but as a man who knew exactly who he was. And when he turned off the light and lay down, the silence in the room felt different. It wasn't loneliness. It was readiness. Because some stories don't end when the world stops watching. They wait. The ballroom shimmered with excess. Crystal chandeliers poured golden light onto polished floors. A live orchestra played softly in the background while laughter bounced effortlessly from one corner to another. Glasses clinked. Expensive perfume lingered in the air. Every guest looked carefully curated. Wealth displayed not just in clothing, but in posture, tone, and entitlement. This was her world. The rich lady stood near the center of it all, accepting compliments like they were owed to her. Friends circled her, praising the decor, the venue, the exclusivity of the guest list. Cameras flashed. Smiles widened. Everything was perfect. Almost. Because somewhere in the back of her mind, a thought kept scratching at her confidence. Suddy. She scanned the room casually, expecting to see him already there. Awkward, uncomfortable, standing alone near a wall. She imagined him clutching a glass too tightly, eyes darting around, painfully aware that he didn't belong. That image brought a small, cruel smile to her lips. Then the doors opened. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. A subtle shift rippled through the room, the way air changes before a storm. Conversations stumbled. Laughter faded unevenly. Heads turned. Not all at once, but one by one, as if pulled by an invisible force. Suddy walked in. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate. Each step was measured, grounded, deliberate. He wore a sharply tailored suit, dark, elegant, timeless. The fabric hugged his frame as if it had been made for him, not borrowed. His shoes gleamed under the lights, polished to perfection. His hair was neatly styled, his posture straight, his presence unmistakable. He looked calm, not the calm of someone trying to hide fear, but the calm of someone who had nothing to prove. The room changed. Whispers ignited like sparks in dry grass. "Who is that? Do you know him? He wasn't on the list, was he? Is he a model? No, he looks important." Eyes followed him as he crossed the hall, some curious, some impressed, some unsettled. Women adjusted their posture unconsciously. Men straightened their jackets. The invisible hierarchy everyone assumed they understood suddenly felt unstable. Suddy wasn't trying to draw attention. Attention came to him anyway. The rich lady turned slowly, her smile still fixed in place, until her eyes landed on him, and froze. Her breath caught so sharply it felt like the room had stolen it from her. That wasn't the janitor she knew. That wasn't the man who scrubbed floors before sunrise. That wasn't the quiet figure who lowered his eyes when spoken to. This man walked like he owned himself. Her heart skipped, not with excitement, but with confusion. Panic. Something dangerously close to fear. Asterisk, is that Suddy? Asterisk. No, it couldn't be. She searched his face desperately for something familiar. Uncertainty, discomfort, embarrassment. There was none. He scanned the room calmly, acknowledging nods with subtle grace. When a waiter almost bumped into him, Suddy stepped aside smoothly, offering a polite smile that instantly earned respect. The lady's friends leaned closer to her. "Do you know him?" one whispered. "He's impressive," another admitted reluctantly. "You didn't mention someone like that would be here." Her throat went dry. "Yes," she said stiffly. "I know him." But even as the words left her mouth, she realized how false they sounded. Because she didn't know him at all. Suddy spotted her then. Their eyes met across the room. For a brief moment, she expected something: resentment, anger, accusation. Instead, he offered a small nod. Polite, calm, controlled. It was worse than confrontation, because it told her something she wasn't ready to face. He didn't need her approval. She felt the room closing in, though nothing had physically changed. Guests continued whispering, stealing glances at Suddy, their curiosity growing with every second. Someone approached him, then another. A man in an expensive suit extended his hand, speaking with interest. Suddy shook it confidently, responding with quiet assurance. A woman laughed at something he said, visibly charmed. Soon, a small circle formed around him, not because he demanded attention, but because people wanted to be near him. The lady watched helplessly as the joke unraveled. This was supposed to be her moment, her spotlight, her power. Yet somehow, effortlessly, it had shifted to the man she had invited to humiliate. And it terrified her. She remembered mocking his clothes, speaking about him like he wasn't human, inviting him here not out of kindness, but cruelty. Now, standing in her designer dress, surrounded by wealth, she felt exposed. Small. For the first time that night, she became aware of something she had never questioned before. Status wasn't something you wore. It was something you carried. And Suddy carried it effortlessly. As he moved through the room, people leaned in when he spoke. They listened. They respected him instinctively, without knowing why. There was weight behind his words, history behind his eyes. This wasn't borrowed confidence. It was remembered. The orchestra paused briefly between songs. The silence magnified the tension in the room. Someone cleared their throat. Glasses clinked nervously. The lady's smile finally cracked. She felt like a spectator at her own party. And worst of all, she felt seen, not judged. Seen. Seen for the smallness she had hidden behind wealth. She swallowed hard, realizing too late that the joke had turned on her. Because when Suddy walked into that hall, he didn't just shock everyone. He changed the balance of the room, and nothing would ever feel the same again. The attention in the room no longer belonged to the birthday girl. It followed Suddy. Wherever he stood, conversations bent toward him. Laughter no longer carried mockery. It carried curiosity, admiration. People leaned in when he spoke, not because he was loud, but because his words were measured, thoughtful, and confident. Men who once ignored people like him now nodded with respect. Women smiled without condescension. Phones discreetly came out, not to ridicule, but to remember. Suddy wasn't performing. He was simply being himself. Someone asked him where he worked. He answered honestly. I manage maintenance at a private estate. There was no shame in his voice, no apology. Instead of laughter, there was a pause. Then admiration. That explains your discipline, one man said. You carry yourself like a leader, another added. The rich lady stood frozen near the bar, watching the scene unravel. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had imagined whispers behind his back, not people asking for his number, not invitations to sit, not genuine interest. Every smile he received felt like a mirror turned toward her cruelty. Then it happened. A woman in an elegant black dress approached Suddy. She introduced herself calmly, professionally. She wasn't a guest. She was someone important. I work with a high-end fashion agency, she said. I don't usually do this at events like these, but I couldn't help noticing you. She handed him her phone. We're holding a private modeling audition next week. I think you'd be perfect. The world seemed to stop. Suddy glanced at the phone, then back at her. He didn't rush. He didn't glow with desperation. He smiled gently. Thank you, he said. I'll consider it. Consider it. Not beg for it. Not cling to it. Opportunity had knocked quietly, but it had knocked for him. The whispers exploded now. Did you hear that? A modeling agency? He could be on billboards. The rich lady's hands trembled slightly around her glass. This was supposed to be his humiliation. Instead, it was his unveiling. She remembered every cruel joke, every dismissive word, every time she spoke about him like he was invisible. And now the room saw him clearly. Suddy caught her eye once more across the hall. There was no revenge in his expression, no triumph, just calm acknowledgement, as if to say, Asterisk, I survived your smallness. Asterisk. The party ended later than planned, but its purpose had already been rewritten. Guests left talking about one man. Not the woman who hosted the night, but the man she tried to shame. When Suddy finally stepped outside into the cool night air, he paused. The city lights reflected softly in his eyes. He hadn't come to prove anything. Yet everything had been proven. The joke didn't break him. It didn't shrink him. It revealed him. And for the woman who thought wealth gave her power, the lesson was unavoidable. You can mock someone's position. You can misunderstand their silence. But you can never measure a person's worth by the uniform they wear. Because sometimes the people you overlook are simply waiting for the moment. The world finally looks back. Suddy didn't rise because he proved anyone wrong. He rose because he never believed their lies. Never underestimate someone just because of their job, their silence, or their patience. Some people are not struggling. They're preparing. Back-end index pointing right, like, subscribe, and share this story. Because respect costs nothing, but arrogance can cost everything.